Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. If you're new here, welcome. Also, this is part 2 of a really amazing interview with my friend Katie at French Wine Tutor. So I'd recommend you pause this, go listen to episode 72, where you will hear the first part of this interview. If you've been listening along, so glad to have you back here. This is part 2 of my interview with Katie from at French Wine Tutor. So excited for you to hear all of her recommendations and for her tips on French pronunciation. We do a little bit in this part of the episode where I say it and how I say a French wine region and how I've been saying it. And she tells me what is the French pronunciation. And don't worry, there was full permission to correct me. That was the goal. But I think it was just like a fun way to learn about. And she gave us some history on like why things are pronounced the way that they are. Really, really cool. So I am just going to step aside and let you listen to the second part of this interview. So what if folks want to try more French wine? What would be your recommendations? How should they start? And especially like I think most of my audience is either US or Canada. How should they start? What should they look for?
If you're looking for more French wine, like in general, just to explore like out of the box, or like if you have like...
Yeah, just in general of like, I imagine, because like I thought this was very interesting. A lot of people that I talk to, they're like, I feel like I don't know what to buy when it comes to French wine, or I don't know what to look for. Like I'm just comfortable buying like California or Washington or, like the wines that I see that I recognize, and they don't realize like the whole French wine world is both fairly affordable in a lot of ways. Yeah. And there's a lot to try. So is there anything that, like just kind of like how to think about it or along those lines?
Yeah, so I think another major cultural differentiation between the US and Canada and France is we love a big brand, right? We love a recognizable label, something that we are like, oh, I know that person, or oh, I recognize this because I had it at XYZ. In France, it's more about like the cooperatives, the groups of people, the families. And so there's lots of offshoots of that. And oftentimes that causes for more confusion on the US side because people are like, well, I don't recognize that person, or I don't recognize that vineyard or whatever. And so I don't want to drink it because of it. I say lean into it. If you don't know it, then it's probably good to try. And the reality is you're not going to like everything that you try. So you just have to like take a chance on it, try something completely different from a producer or a region that you may not have heard of. And you might love it. You might hate it. But either way, you tried something new. And to your point about French wines not being expensive, give yourself a cap. Be like, okay, I'm not going to spend more than $30 a bottle on wine, and I have a budget for 3 bottles. Okay. So go into the wine shop, maybe look for a white, a red, and a sparkling. Look for things that maybe you might not have seen before. Is it an interesting bottle shape on the Rosé? Is it something that is not from Provence? Is it something from not Bordeaux that's red, like Loire Valley Reds? Amazing value. And you can find those for under, 15 in certain areas of the country. And the same goes for the whites. You can find amazing Beaujolais Blanc because it's not what you would necessarily expect. So I would say lean into the uncertainty. Do something that you may not have tried before. Definitely set yourself a budget though, because you can get into trouble. and ask people, to your point, like maybe if you're going to the grocery store, there isn't someone who's specialized in wines that's there. But if you are going to a smaller wine shop or a smaller grocery store, there's people that work there that are supposed to help you. That's why they work there. And so don't be shy in asking those people questions.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great way to go about it. I've also heard from people before, like if you do have like if you're like one of those people that like to buy by the case, like 12 bottles, like
Mhm.
just go into like a small wine shop and just be like, okay, I'm exploring this or I'm curious about. And so it could literally just be like, I'm curious about French wine. Can you make me a box that kind of represents a lot of different things and gives me some good variety and like give them like the power and then that way you get to try a lot of different things. And I feel like that's kind of that same mentality that you're saying going in with. Like, if you see something that's unfamiliar, instead of kind of hiding away from it, like, go towards it, like, give it a
Yeah.
try.
Yeah. That's fascinating about people buying cases. I never do
I
that.
know, right? No, I'm not that way at all either. I'm like, I already have
Yeah.
way too much. Like, I actually just need to go in for the bottle that
No.
I'm looking for or something. But I know a lot of people that like, yeah, we just like to buy like 12 wines at a time, bring them back and stock up and then we'll drink up and then we'll go to the next. And so
Gosh.
everybody buys wine a little differently.
More power to them, honestly. I mean, I live in a tiny New York apartment, so I can't
Fair.
really I can't really stock too much at a time.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Just a quick reminder, if you are not on my mailing list yet, what are you waiting for? I would love for you to join. When you do, you'll get a free shopping guide that has 15 of my favorite wines under $15. Head to corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there'll be a little section where you can join the mailing list. I send out a weekly newsletter filled with wine tips, recommendations, special offers, and so much more. Now, let's get back to the show. So now I was just curious, 'cause I feel like with your experience in French wine, this would be a fun question to ask. What are three French wines or even regions, if you didn't want to get too specific, that you think deserve more attention that folks should be on the lookout for? And this could be like I said, styles, producers, regions. But yeah, three French wines that you think deserve more attention.
Ah, gee. I think these are hard questions.
That's fair. I'm sorry. I know it's like you're like,
No, it's good.
Haley.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's a good thought exercise. I think that a lot of France is underrated. I think anything that isn't Burgundy or Bordeaux and has that name recognition, or Provence as well. Like I'll give it to Provence. Everybody knows Provence for the rosé. I say anything that's not that is fair game. But for me, recently, I would say I just posted a reel the other day about Corsica. I feel like Corsica is poised to have a fantastic moment. I think the quality that's coming from there is really, really great, and it's just continued to go up. I think the rosés from Corsica offer a really interesting difference and comparison to rosés from elsewhere in France. I also think one of the greatest French underdogs is Alsace, and they have been an underdog for way too long. And I think people have really come out hard against Alsace because they say, oh, it's French, oh, it's German, I don't understand what's going on in the label. But to Alsace's credit, things are going to get great for Alsace because it's going to get warmer. And because it's going to get warmer, that's going to open up a whole other world of wine growing for them. And they're already experimenting that. They're already trying so much of that. So I went there a couple of years ago and it was really inspiring to see their approach, how they're changing, what they're doing. They're doing a ton of experimentation, things that I'm not seeing in other regions. Like they're doing a ton of skin contact, orange style wine blends between Gewürztraminer and Riesling and other things. There are certain vineyards that are experimenting with growing Merlot in Alsace, which is like wild to think about, and Syrah. And so I think that Alsace can really go places, and also Alsace dry Riesling is
The
amazing.
best.
So, and the great thing about Alsace too is that if you're an American looking to get into French wine, it's a good like gateway into it because almost everything is labeled varietally. So if you're like, well, I really do like Riesling, then that's great. Then you can find that on the label. You might not see a ton of grape varieties you recognize. I mean, like Auxerrois, Pinot Blanc, like these are not things we normally see, but they also grow great Pinot Noir there. Really about to have a moment. It's opening up. So I would say Corsica, Alsace, and I always return to Beaujolais because Beaujolais has obviously had its up and up with the crew, but I was also there recently and they're in this renaissance and they've come of age. So obviously you had this like 80s, 90s, gang of five going back to natural winemaking and organic and biodynamic winemaking. And that was super influential against the, mega controversial Beaujolais Nouveau bulk wine situation. But now what we're seeing is prices in Burgundy for a lot of people are just becoming inaccessible. Beaujolais has this moment with the Mâconnais just north of it where they're really making high quality, fantastic wines at a great price point. A lot of times these labels are much easier to read than your classic Burgundy or Bordeaux because they do have the actual name of the winemaker who's made it. And then they have the varietal, or they just say Beaujolais. And under that, they say Gamay. So there's definitely something that's happening there that I feel like needs to be paid attention to. And outside of the, love for Beaujolais Cru, because everybody at this point, if you try a Beaujolais Cru and you don't like it, are we friends? I don't think so. Like, you haven't tried the right Beaujolais Cru if you don't like Beaujolais Cru. But I do think that like the white from Beaujolais are really, really getting great. The cru system is undergoing this dramatic shift where they're trying to add a Premier cru on top of just the regular cru. So like Fleury has applied for this Premier cru status. There are other cru that are looking to do this as well with certain plots. And so I think Beaujolais, Corsica, and Alsace would be my three.
Oh, those are great answers. I love all of them. I haven't had a lot from Corsica. I've had only a couple, but I need to explore more. But yeah, Alsace, great wine region, especially, further north, really wonderful whites. And they're affordable too, because not a lot of people know about them.
Very affordable.
Yes. And Beaujolais, those cru, for those that are listening that are kind of newer to the wine world, if they want to try a Beaujolais cru, those are ones that are labeled, they typically say Beaujolais, but then they have the name of the cru typically, right? So you'll see something that's like Beaujolais and then something else French. If you look up just online, the Beaujolais cru, it's spelled CRU cru. You can see like kind of a list of those and look out for those. Or like we've been saying, go to your small wine shop and be like, I've heard of Beaujolais cru. Talk to me about it. Like, what should I be trying to give this a try? No, I love it. Okay, well, I feel like we can't end this podcast without doing a little language bit since you are the pronunciation expert here. So I just thought it'd be fun to kind of talk about some French wine words folks see on the bottle. And so I thought first maybe going through some of kind of the top wine regions. And then like, I feel like those are ones that people are familiar with. And I'll just say the region. And then I totally understand that you are going to sound like you are correcting me. And that's what I'm asking for. So,
okay, all right. Noted.
Would that work okay for you?
Yes. Okay, just as long as everybody knows, this is a disclaimer. She has asked for this. I'm not doing this to be a cruel person.
No, I'm saying them in my very Wisconsin American accent, like the only way I know how. And Katie's gonna tell us how you say it with the correct French pronunciation.
I'm sorry. Wait, do you know Marie Cheslick from Slick Wines?
Yes. She's also from Wisconsin. I know, right? Like, I guess Wisconsin, we're like, wine, we love it.
There is. I feel like it's happening, but you reminded me of that because she and I do a lot of collabs and we're working on something really fun coming up. And she's always like, I'm going to say it in pure Wisconsin every single time. And I'm like, Marie, like, you don't have to do that. Your name is Marie. Your mother speaks French, but I always give her a hard time. But
no, I'm like, it makes it just like, because it's like, I know I got a little of that accent still. So I'm like, as long as I own it, it's fine. We're just going to dive in. Okay. So like I said, I just have, what do I have? Like, I think I have 8 of the French wine regions here that are just kind of popular that people would see. So first, starting with the one we've already talked about, Alsace.
Yes. So that was really good. I would say, as long as it's not all sauce, that drives me crazy. Or my mother says Alsace, and I'm like, no, I don't know why. I don't know where but the all sauce thing drives me nuts. I'm like, where's the U, you guys? It's not there. It's Alsace.
Alsace.
Yes, Alsace. You were quite close though.
Okay, interesting. Because I've always heard like Alsace. Like I thought that was that's what kills me. It's like I hear these things and I go, that sounds like the correct thing. Because actually, more Wisconsin would have been to go like the sound, because we like the.
It's true. Yeah, I can see that. And you know what? It's interesting because Alsace as a place like has so much like different cultural influence in it. A very Germanic, obviously, which is not too dissimilar from Wisconsin. So I do feel like there was a time where the two would be similar in their pronunciation. But anyways.
I love it. Okay, Alsace. So there's no U. We just say Alsace.
And the S is a Z sound.
Okay, Alsace. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Bordeaux.
Yeah, correct.
Bordeaux. Okay, that one's pretty
easy. One. I think that's why they have a monopoly on the market, more or less, because it's just so easy to say. And people are like, well, I know what it is, so I'm going to get it. Yeah.
Yes. No, that's a good point. That one's pretty straightforward. Okay. So I know Burgundy, like when we say it in English, we say Burgundy, but in French, it's like Bourgogne or something like that.
Yes. So the correct way to say it in French is Bourgogne.
Bourgogne. Okay.
And the reason, apparently, blame the English if there's any. But supposedly the rumor is that there was an English admiral who could not pronounce Bourgogne. And so somebody made up this other name. And this is like way back before wine. It was like with the wars and between Burgundy and England at the time. And so they made up this name for it in English because this one guy could not pronounce it to save his life. And so that's why we say it. But if you talk to people in the region, the trade association is like really pushing hard to like make it Bourgogne in everything and like dispel this, ancient 8th century Franco-English, whatever. So yeah.
That is hilarious. So it's like, yeah, because that is one of the only regions that has like an English version of the region. I always was curious about that because I'm like, I've known of it as Burgundy, but then whenever you look on the bottle, a lot of times it has that Bourgogne spelled out. And so I'm like, I can see the connection, but also why? None of the other ones. Now we know.
Yes.
I love it.
So Burgundy, if you see Burgundy written out on the label, for those who are listening, chances are it's not real Burgundy. But if you see Bourgogne, then you know that it's actually from.
Okay. Bourgogne. And it's the spelled out version is like Bourgogne. So it doesn't look quite like what we're saying either. So just for folks that are listening, it's like, how do I look for that when I have no idea what it looks like? Okay.
Yes, sorry. We can add like a little subtitle.
Yeah. We'll have the list of them written so it's a little easier. Because yeah, French is one of those two where I hear it and I go, I have no idea what to look for when like or how that's spelled because there's so many things you don't say. Okay, how about champagne?
So interestingly enough, this is pronounced similar to Bourgogne because there is the similar letter combination at the end. So the G and E at the end of champagne in French would be champagne. So they don't say champagne, they say champagne.
Champagne.
Yeah, so there's like that G and E at the end makes a kind of a y sound in French, not just in wine regions, but when you're speaking French generally, that is also the rule.
Okay, can you say it one more time?
Yes, champagne.
Champagne. Oh, okay. So I wasn't hearing the y at the end because it's so like, it's just very fluid. But okay, so they do both have that y at the end, but it's just, not a lot of emphasis. Okay, champagne.
Yeah. A lot of times it's clipped when you hear French speakers say it because it's a lot. And when you're talking fast, sometimes you can't.
Right. No, that makes sense. Okay, cool. Okay. How about Jura?
That was correct.
Yeah. Jura. That one's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Thankfully. We have science to thank for that.
Okay. Yes, true. Is that Louis Pasteur, right? From the region?
Jurassic period. They found the dinosaur bones in the Jura Mountains, and I believe so that's why it's called the Jurassic period. So they just didn't like translate in between the two. So it's Jurassic in both languages.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is one where I look at it, I'm like, I never say this right. The Languedoc-Roussillon.
Yeah. This one, I mean, I'm surprised we don't have an English version of this because it is quite a lot. But at least now they're officially two separate regions. So most people now will get the benefit of the doubt and they don't have to say the whole thing together. But for the first word, you would say Languedoc. So it's very clipped. If you were to pronounce it, I guess in like an old way, you would say Languedoc. Because the Languedoc area of France had its own dialect and its own language. And that's what Languedoc means. It means the language of the Oc, which is the people who lived in that area. So Languedoc. And then the second one is Roussillon. So that one I feel like it feels very, very French, like just super Frenchified. You have that beautiful R at the beginning. You have double letters throughout. You have the nasal to finish things out. But Roussillon, and the first part of that word, it refers to the redness of the clay and the soil that's there.
Oh, cool. Okay. So Languedoc, you don't say like the middle part. So it's just like Languedoc.
Go through it. Yeah.
Okay. And then Roussillon.
Yeah. Roussillon.
Okay, cool. All right. How about, Provence, I feel like is one that also has gotten into an English way of saying it versus a French way. So like to me, I'd see it and I go Provence, but how do we say it with French?
Yeah. I mean, very, very similar, almost exactly the same. Provence.
Okay. So it's not too different. Provence.
No, it's very similar.
Okay. And then Loire, is there a way to say that in French better than the English?
I feel like English speakers see Loire and they see the O and the I and they're like, and that's just they throw their hands up and they're like, I don't understand what this is. And I get it because it's a little overwhelming. But yeah, so the O and the I together make the WA sound. So Loire. And then you have the R at the end.
Loire. Yeah? Loire. I feel like I'm not saying the R at the end though. Is that kind of how you're supposed to say it?
It kind of like gets stuck in your throat because it's at the end. So it's not like super pronounced, I would say, but it is certainly there. So
Okay.
Loire.
Loire. Okay. We'll work on it. I know my French. I meant to get more French. I'm going to France in a couple of weeks, and I think I'll actually maybe be in France when this comes out. I'm trying to remember.
Oh,
But I
great.
tried to learn some French with Babbel, and then I totally fell off the wagon and didn't do
Oh
more of
man.
it.
It's
So
tough.
I know it is like language to me has been one of the toughest things. I'm always very impressed with folks who can speak multiple languages because it's something that like it never clicked in my head, and I just like it took me
Yeah.
so long to even just understand enough Spanish to be able to travel in Spain and do stuff. And then French I've been finding has been much more difficult because I look at it and I go, why can't I just say all of the letters that are there? Why is it always
Yes.
so different?
That's what my husband struggled with too. He took Spanish, obviously being from California, it's a big part of the culture. And so yeah, he took Spanish through most of his middle school, high school career. And so he started to try to learn French, also using Babbel, and he just really struggles with seeing all the vowels together and all those extra letters and all these extra syllables. He's like, I don't understand. Why can't I just do it the way that Spanish does it, which is exactly as it's pronounced every single time? So it's a little bit easier. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not in charge of the French language, but
Right,
it is what
right.
it is.
And I mean, to be fair, English also is awful because at least in French,
Oh,
there are
yeah.
rules, right? You follow the rules. Like, as long as you learn the
Yeah.
rules, you're good. In
Yeah.
English, it's like, yeah, there are no rules. Sorry. We just kind of did
Yeah.
whatever we want.
Yeah, French has a lot of exceptions to the rules, and it's funny because when you're learning French and you ask somebody, "Oh, well that's pronounced differently." They're like, "Well, yeah, it's just an exception." And then you're like, "Well, why is it an exception?" You're like, "Well, I shall say, yeah." It's like I have no idea, you know. So, but it's interesting what you say about English because it's true. I feel like it's one of the hardest languages to learn, and we don't give enough people credit who do learn English as a second language.
Yeah, no, I've tried teaching English. When I was in Spain, I tried to teach English, and there was one point, like it's also like the certain things were like, what's the difference between like at and in? She's like, I'm
Yeah,
at this place, I'm in this place. I'm like,
right. Yeah.
well, like one of them means like it's clear in my head. Like I can tell what you're saying, like when you say it and what the difference is.
Yep.
But anywho, yeah, language is hard. So I kind of wanted to give you a chance here too. I wasn't sure, what question to ask when it came to like the French. So I was just gonna ask if you had any like general language tips to kind of keep in mind when speaking French, or maybe there's a better question that I'm not asking that you want to answer. This podcast is sponsored by VoChill. When you're enjoying a glass of wine, temperature matters. And you don't need to be a wine expert to know this. You know this the minute you realize you forgot to put the bottle of wine in the fridge, and now you're stuck with lukewarm Sauvignon Blanc that is the opposite of refreshing. You know adding ice cubes will just water the wine down, but it seems like it's your only option. Not anymore. I want to introduce you to one of my favorite wine gadgets, VoChill. This gadget is as simple as it is elegant. It will keep wine perfectly chilled in your own wine glass. No more clunky metal or plastic tumblers or ice in your wine. While this gadget is an absolute must during the summer months, I don't enjoy wine without it from June to September. It's also incredibly useful for those days when you're craving a glass of white or rosé, but you don't want to wait for the bottle to chill in the fridge. VoChill offers a stemmed and stemless chiller in multiple colors, so you're bound to find one that's perfect for you. They also make the perfect gift. I should know. I got one for my mom at Christmas a couple years ago, and she loves it. Head to vochill.com, that's VOCHILL.com, to get your perfect wine chiller, and don't forget to use code CORKANDFIZZ for 15% off your order. This podcast is sponsored by the Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club. Interested in trying new wines, but not sure where to start? Or maybe you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you love the idea of tasting wine live with me. If that's you, come join my Cork Crew Virtual Wine Club, and you'll get to sip wine with me twice a month while I help you find new favorite wines. The Cork Crew is not your ordinary wine club. This is a community of people who are passionate about exploring new flavors, learning about different wine styles, and having fun along the way. And the best part about this club, purchasing the wine is completely optional. Plus, all events are recorded. and you have access to the full library of recordings as a court crew member, so you can always catch up if you can't make it live. Oh, and did I mention it's virtual, which means you get to do all of this from the comfort of your sofa in your PJs. No need to worry about driving in crappy traffic, finding a designated driver, or spending an arm and a leg on a taxi. Want to give it a try without the commitment? You're in luck. Right now, I'm offering a free class pass to anybody who wants to try out the Court Crew Virtual Wine Tasting Club. With this pass, you'll be able to join a Court Crew event of your choosing. No strings attached. I don't need your credit card. I don't need you to sign up for anything. You'll be my guest. Simply head to corkandfizz.com/free class pass to get your class pass and be one step closer to becoming a member of the best wine tasting club around, the Court Crew. I can't wait to see you there. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I think to your point earlier is that French is not like Spanish. It's very, very different. And everything that you pronounce is going to be much more closed off. So in English, and particularly in American English, we speak with a lot of slack in our mouths. We speak with our lips kind of slack jawed. We're very like lazy, like we're back here in our mouth. French is very pointed to the front of your mouth. There's a lot of lip action. There's a lot of nasal. And so it's much more work, and it's not, I think where people go wrong with the accent is that they try to use their French, but with their American like mouth movements. And so that's where it gets tricky, because the French don't speak their language in their mouth the same way that we speak our language. And so you really have to shift between speaking at the back of your mouth to speaking at the front of your mouth and your face. So that's a massive difference. And the other thing that I would say is that French has a lot of letter and vowel combinations that once you learn those, you're able to speak better and pronounce things better, because those combinations show up all over the place. So like you said, Bordeaux perfectly. Why? Because EAU, no matter where you are, is going to be an O sound. And those are just things that are rote memorization. You just have to remember, okay, I know that this combination G and E makes the Y sound. So I can remember that when I'm looking at whether it's a wine word or it's a regular word in the rest of the French language. So I would say those are some of the biggest hurdles that I see in pronunciation.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That last one especially is one that I really wanted to get before I went to France, because I really wanted to be able to at least make that effort to like say something that I saw on the menu. Like I knew I wasn't going to totally learn everything, and I'd still need to look things up, but I was really hoping I could kind of get to the point where like I recognized, like this is written like this. So like this makes this sound, this makes this sound. It's still going to sound like it has an American accent on it, but there's going to be effort. Like you said, like with Bordeaux, I know I don't say Bordeaux or something, or like,
right, yeah.
And like with Bourgogne, no, I'm still saying it right. Am I close? Okay, like at least like that there's the effort that like I'm not saying like Bourgogne,
Right, yeah.
that I kind of know. And I feel like those sound silly, but then there are other combinations that I see and I try to say it in the French way and it's not even close, but I think that's
no,
to point out.
I mean, there's some words that you see and it's just like, I mean, there's words that I see where I'm like, what? Like I look at it, and I've been speaking French now for like over 15 years and it's still like just over my head. I'm like, okay, I need to like look back at this and see how they would pronounce it. I had this issue when I was recording that Corsica video that I did, because it's like in Corsica, there's like different linguistic rules because they have their own like dialect, and like there's a lot of Italian influence. And so I was like, some of these grave names just sound Italian. I have no idea. I have to like go back in my vocal performance like diction class and open my Italian like diction textbook from college and like see how am I actually supposed to pronounce this. But then with a French accent, it's a mess and a half. So nobody's perfect. That was the whole point of that.
No, I think that's a great point. And yeah, because I feel like that's the same in like at least in Spain, right? I know Spanish. I know how to pronounce Spanish. But then you go to like where cava is made over in, I'm forgetting the name of the region, but they speak a different language. It's like that combination of Spanish and French that combines together. And now suddenly all the rules that I learned for Spanish,
oh yeah,
take it with a grain of salt, because there's something else added in, and then there's always going to be that. And I think like, I guess one thing that I'm curious your insight on before we get to the last couple questions here is just, I feel like when you go to another country or when you're learning this, I feel like as long as you're making that effort, do you think that is like Do French people respond well to that? I know you've taken some trips. I know you're not French, but you've taken trips to France and spent some time there. Do you think like at least just making that effort, even if it's not perfect, is there usually a pretty good response to that?
I feel like yes. Again, I think this is something that we're watching change in real time because of the Olympics. Because, as we led up to the Olympics, effectively there was like a major hospitality shift that was required by the government, and kind of was like everybody needs to make an effort to learn English, be more friendly, be more international, all of these things. And so I think at the same time, I think our generation and the generations that have come after us are very cognizant of this idea of the ugly American that kind of arose in the 70s, 80s, and 90s of, large swaths of Americans coming into tour groups, expecting everybody to speak English and, making a mess and being loud and not being respectful generally. And I think that we kind of grew up with that. And so for a generation that really focused in on studying abroad and is much more cognizant of the way that other people in other countries live their lives, I do feel like culturally there's a shift both in the US and in France about the way that we interact with each other and being a little bit more open-minded, maybe giving each other a little bit more grace. Because on the one side, historically, one of the biggest reasons why the French were very closed off to English influence, not just because English itself and England was always a major, not an ally, but an enemy for hundreds and hundreds of years. There was also a lot of French cultural hegemony. So the language of France for everybody was required. I mean, for hundreds of years, like it was the language of diplomacy. It was the language of government. It was the language of the army. You look at like other things that still have a ton of French influence in them, like food, fencing, ballet class. Like there's so many things in our world and from a cultural perspective and a government perspective, especially that come from the French. And so there is this kind of like historical context of maybe if the average French person doesn't think this today, a couple of generations ago, well, but we're French and it's our language. That's the most important one. And we're the ones that founded all this stuff. And so you have these Americans coming in with their big brash English and they're not apologetic and they don't want to participate in it. And they're like, it's like, of course they're butting heads because they both think they're the best. Right. And as a result, and neither of them are, right. We're just people. Right. So I think that that's changing now. And I do feel like making an effort, saying bonjour and merci, s'il vous plaît, santé, like little things like that you can learn that really help to grease that cultural wheel that I feel like has been greasy or squeaky for a very long time that really, really needs, more cultural understanding. I do feel like that helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that was such a great answer. Thank you. Last questions here. So I have a little speed round that I do at the end, but just before I get to that, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about what's next for you. Is there anything you want to share that you're working on, that you're excited that's coming up, or how should people also find you and, learn more from you?
Well, my biggest platform continues to be Instagram. For whatever reason, Threads seems to be taking off. I don't know. So if you prefer text, trying out Threads more, people seem to enjoy that, and I'm enjoying it. In terms of big projects, as I mentioned earlier, I'm working on something with Marie Cheslick from Slick Wines. She actually has an online wine school that's called the Slick School, and we are working on a course called French Wine 201, which basically goes into more in depth than a regular French Wine 101 type of a course where we go into history, pronunciation, all these kinds of things. So we're working hard on that. I owe her an outline. I'm overdue as I'm looking at my clock of things I owe her for that course. So sorry, Marie, if you're listening to this. But yeah, so we're working on that. I think it'll be really fun because I'm trying to explore things that are a bit more off of Instagram and more on the educational writing side of things as I look to where do we want to take French Wine Tutor in the future. And it really goes back to education for me and providing educational resources that are either free or at an accessible cost, because I personally believe very strongly that education should be free or accessible to anybody who wants it. So that's kind of what I have cooking.
Yay, good. Yeah, and people can find, I don't know if we've said it out loud, but it's French Wine Tutor. That's where you find
at French Wine
Katie,
Tutor.
yeah.
Wow, I'm terrible at plugging myself. There you go.
You're good. You're good.
At French Wine Tutor.
I'm sure everybody will see it by this point. It'll be in the title. It'll be in the show notes. But yes, look for
good.
French Wine Tutor. Okay, so like I said, that's the last part of it. It's a speed round, just meant to be like, don't think about it too much because these can be questions that like you could spend lots of time thinking about. So
Oh
they're just kind of
God.
fun.
Okay.
So like the first question is your favorite wine at the moment.
I would say Vouvray.
Ooh, good Shannon Blanc. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Yeah.
love it. Okay. What about, and you're gonna hate this one too, your favorite wine region that you visited?
Oh no, the terrible one. I have to say I'm very lucky in that I've been able to visit so many in France and have plans to visit many more. But I will say for me, it has to be Beaujolais because it just stole my heart. I mean, Beaujolais has a very special place in my heart because it was one of those first French wines that I tried and loved immediately. And then my original trip got pushed because of COVID and didn't happen. And then I had to effectively wait 3 years to do it again. So it was finally going there in, was it? Yeah, 2023, last summer was phenomenal. And I highly recommend going because it was
Oh,
amazing.
okay. When we're in there, we have like, I think we land in Beaujolais at one point and we're driving to Burgundy.
Oh, okay.
But I think now, like I've heard from a lot of people that Beaujolais is really wonderful. And obviously, Caroline as well, living in Lyon, I've been following her page for a
Oh,
while.
yes.
So I think we might have to spend a little bit of that day before we leave and drive up to Burgundy so we can
Oh
at
my
least spend a
God.
little time there.
True.
You're
Yeah,
like, a
you
day
will
is not
not.
enough, but at least do it.
Oh, yeah. You're flying into Lyon? Is that
So we're flying into Paris from the US, but then we're going to take the train over to Nantes. We have a friend who lives there. And
okay?
then
Cool.
we're flying from Nantes to Lyon and then
Okay.
going up to Beaune so that we can spend some time. Burgundy was like my first French love, so I'm very
Of
excited
course. Yeah.
to get to try
Yeah.
that be there.
Well, the drive from Lyon up to Burgundy is a beautiful drive. I mean, you'll see vineyards everywhere. You can't miss it. But there's an area, gosh, I'm gonna have to like go back through my Beaujolais geography because they're in the beautiful, like mountainous, hilly area of Beaujolais, closer towards the south that they call Little Tuscany because it you would actually think you're in Tuscany. Like it is that beautiful, rolling hills, like cliff sides, like just and it comes out of nowhere too. You like look up from the car and you're like, oh my God, what? Like it's insane. So yeah, you should I'll have to look into that and I'll send you.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Cool. Okay, how about so this is on the flip side, what is a wine region you'd like to visit that you haven't yet?
High on my list right now is Jura and Savoie, but I am not a great winter driver. So I need to convince my husband to go and be my designated chauffeur for the week because I cannot drive on mountains. So
Very fair. Okay, how about a favorite? This is again like kind of at the moment, or what's the first thing that pops into your mind? Wine and food pairing. What do people need to try?
oh gosh, I did this great series where I pushed myself to pair junk food with French wine, and it was like my most favorite thing that I've done on French Wine Tutor ever because it was just fun to like open a bag of Cheetos and like test out pairings. It was great. So I am all pro like snack food, like high-low pairings, like get a big burger from whatever burger joint you like to go to and pair it with a Premier Cru like Pinot Noir. Like last night we went over to a friend's house for pizza and it was really like truly the most low key night. Like we were in our pajamas, there's dogs and kids running around. And I literally did that. I brought like a Premier Cru Givry and we just paired it with pizza and it was like the best. So like have fun with it. Do something like crazy with like junk food or like high low type of thing.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Because you don't have to, like, I feel like so many people save those fancy wines or, that high end wine for like a beautiful dinner or something special. And you're like, it's actually really great with just pizza and friends. You don't have to have
Yeah.
this big,
No.
big, huge thing of it. Okay. Last question is what is a wine that surprised you lately?
I'm going to say, I think we had a Vin de France a little while ago. And for those listening who might not know, Vin de France is kind of like the most accessible French wine classification type that there is. And it doesn't really necessarily have rules about regions or grape varieties. And it can be kind of a free for all. I think this category is definitely going to go up. This is not a short answer. I'm sorry. It was a Vin de France, and I think it was a Syrah and Pinot Noir blend.
Oh, wow.
And it was actually really good. I'm trying to remember. I can remember the label or something, but it was delicious, and I was delightfully surprised by it. So see, there you go. You know, never sell yourself short. There's always a surprise to be had.
Yeah, and I think calling out that Vin de France too, like you said, like the one that like it doesn't have a region to it. I think a lot of times it was like people tried to avoid it because it meant that there were no rules and you didn't know the quality. But I think a lot of fun things are coming out of that because there are no rules. They get to try.
Yes.
They get to put Pinot Noir and Syrah together, which you would never see in France otherwise.
Well, exactly. And I mean, that's one of the things that winemakers bemoan when you talk to them in France is they're like, oh my God, you're American. Like you guys have no rules to your wine. Like you can do cool stuff. And they're like very envious that we have this like very open appellation system, because in France, there's like this very strict hierarchy. And in certain regions, you really can't depart from that. And so when they want to try something that's different from their dad, because their climate is drastically different from what their grandfather lived through, and the winemaking methods are very different from what he did or what their father did or their mother or whatever, they're like, but I can't do that because it's not in the AOC law. So now I have to make my own like Vin de France label. And so they get like really excited. There's some really great stuff that's coming out of Vin de France because it's just more flexible to modernity. So yeah.
Oh, so cool. All right. I think that's a perfect way to end it. Thank you so much, Katie, for coming on and talking to us and teaching us about all this. I really, really, really enjoyed it. And it's the perfect start. Like I said, I'm doing a little French mini series here, and I feel like this is the perfect way to start it.
Amazing. Well, happy to help. And thank you so much for having me. And
Awesome.
Have a great trip.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. If you are not already, make sure you are following Katie on Instagram at French Wine Tutor. She shares amazing content, both about pronouncing French wine terms and just learning about French wine in general. As always, if you loved this episode, it would mean so much to me if you could rate it, leave a review. If you haven't left a review yet, it takes, less than 5 to 10 minutes. Go on Apple Podcasts. If that is not your typical listening choice, just go on Apple Podcasts. That's where you can leave reviews. Let me know what you liked about this episode or what you liked about past episodes and why you like to listen to this. It would really mean a lot to me. In next week's episode, we are going to be diving into my trip to France. I'm so excited. So as I'm recording this, I have not taken the trip yet, but by the time you're listening, I will be back. In the first episode that is going to be part of the kind of mini series of my trip, I'm going to do a little overview and give you some kind of travel and planning tips and how I planned this trip to France. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm also going to be coming back. It'll be like the week that I come back from France. So I'm going to have a lot of excitement and a lot of fun things to talk about. Thanks again for listening. And if you want to learn more about wine, come follow me at Cork and Fizz on Instagram. And if you're interested in exploring new wines and joining an incredible community of wine lovers, I'm telling you, these group of people are just so fun to hang out with. I think I always forget that like the wine world and even just the internet in general can be a little snobby and unwelcoming and judgy. That is not this community. This is a place where you can ask questions, learn new things, judgment free. So this is my virtual tasting club. It's called the Cork Crew. Head to corkandfizz.com/free class pass and you can come check out a tasting for free. Cheers!